Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I am John Schmelk. It is time for our annual tradition. It is our Giants beat writer roundtable. Joining us as always, about to head out to Muscle Beach, is my understanding, is Paul Schwartz from the New York Post. Paul, how are you?
Yes, I am about to head to Muscle Beach, and if I find any, then I'll report back, okay? Because yeah, it's look, the weekend's coming, right? And this is it for us, right? I mean, look, if Brian Daboll can give his players off mandatory Saturday, Sunday, Monday, then no, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then I can give myself off those days too, right?
No question. Art Stapleton from NorthJersey.com, The Record,
Yep.
and of course, he has his podcast as well. Art, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, John, and trying to get ready. I'm not heading to Muscle Beach, but family time this weekend nonetheless will be much appreciated.
And you can find him on the All In podcast with Art Stapleton, talking all things Giants. And then, unfortunately, Tom Rock is still week to week. He has his Achilles. He's on the practice field, but he's not ready to play in games yet. So we welcome in his colleague from Newsday, the lovely Kim Jones. Kim, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Schmelky?
We're doing great. All right, guys. So we've been through a long spring and summer here. We've watched a lot of practices. We've been in a lot of really hot weather. And finally, we're going to get a game this week. This is airing on Labor Day. We are recording this on Thursday. So if any news happens, by the way, between now and then, do not blame us. It is not our fault. So we will go. I'll go with the veteran reporter first, Paul Schwartz. You've seen a lot of training camps, a lot of practices. I'm going to just throw it out to you, and you can bring us wherever you want. What do you think about this team?
First of all, I think all three of us are veterans in one way, shape, or another.
Well,
So I don't.
you are the most veteran. How about that?
Kayvon Thibodeau in the locker room yesterday was jawing about something, and he said, "Who's been here around the longest? Who's the longest guy here?" And so I was there, and he was saying something about burying writers in cement shoes or throwing them in the river or something that he didn't like, and it was a bizarre conversation. But yes, every time it's veteran and things like that, yes, I seem to get it. Yeah, okay, I get it. What do I think about this team? Um, I mean, I don't think a lot of really great thoughts about this team. I think they're better than they were than the team that stepped off the field at the end of the last season. I think Daniel Jones being healthy is a good start to that because, like him or not, he's the best quarterback on the roster right now, and we saw that last year when he went down. I mean, I don't know if you can convince me a team without Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney is definitely better, but I see what they did there, and I like, Brian Burns is going to be terrific, and Malik Neighbors, the anointed one right now. We'll talk about that later, I guess. I'm sure he'll be terrific. But I think it's going to be a tough sledding. There are glaring deficiencies, I think, on this roster, which we'll get into, and we'll see. We'll see. I know a lot of people outside the building are not optimistic at all about this team. And, I think maybe that's a little bit dire, but I can see why.
Art, how about you?
I could see why people do feel that way, the way Paul said. I think this is really, the Giants, and I think we touched on it last year, but I think we were all a little bit more optimistic last year coming off the playoff year than what actually resulted. But I've said this all along that if year two was year one and year one was year two, you'd feel like they're heading in a great direction here. But obviously you can't pick the timing of everything, and circumstances dictate what the circumstances dictate. But I do think that this team will be competitive. I think they last year went through about the worst quarterback scenario that you can possibly go through in the NFL, and yet somehow down the stretch they won enough games to prevent themselves from getting a future franchise quarterback for this year, which is, that irony that I think still eats away at parts of this fan base. But ultimately, I think Brian Daboll, by taking control of the offense, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, is now building this offense in the mold that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll want. I think maybe they should have done that after year one. I think that's part of the reason why Saquon Barkley is not here. I think they want this defined by pushing the ball downfield. So I think you're going to see an offense that looks a little different. I think you're going to see a defense that, if their top players play well, and they have some elite players up front, if teams can't block Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, teams are going to have a hard time getting the ball downfield to take advantage of the Giants' perceived weakness. So I think that's kind of how I see this team. And a big start, a good start is imperative, because there's that stretch late September, early October where they can really go on a skid. And, you're now talking about where this season goes. Does it go down to tubes? Because it's a rough run there if they don't get things straight right off the bat.
How about you, Kim?
Well, Art just mentioned the defensive front. Dexter Lawrence has to be a plan for anything good that the Giants have. And that's because he's their best player. He's a dominant player. He's in a good mood to start the season. I got to catch up with him just a little bit yesterday, small talk kind of stuff, but that affords itself at this point in the season, not always during the season. So I always enjoy that kind of thing with players in the locker room. I'm still confounded by is Tommy DeVito going to be on this team situation? I mean, you have a starting quarterback, and I think everyone with a heart hopes that Daniel Jones can stay healthy this season. You don't have to root for the Giants to hope that. You have to look at that guy and say, maybe this is the year he finally is, as healthy as he was early on in his career. He can make plays when he is healthy, and maybe that helps the Giants. Actually, that surely, in my mind, obviously helps the Giants. But to me, it's the wide receiver core that has to define this offense. And it's not just because of Malik, although it's a lot because of Malik. And he also has players around him who, in my view, have so embraced the idea of what Malik does for them that I find it interesting. I find it very team friendly and team inclusion type of thing. And I think that the Giants can go far if Daniel's upright and if the wide receiver core is as it appears. Does it carry everything? No, because none of them play cornerback.
Yeah, and I think this is a good place to start, Kim, is talk about what's going on around the quarterback, right? And Paul, I want to start with you here because you've been watching practice longer than all of us. This is my 18th season. So I've been watching Giant training camp practices now for 18 years. And I will put a caveat here that Odell Beckham Jr. missed a lot of training camp with a hamstring, so he's not included in this statement. But Malik Neighbors is probably the most impressive rookie I have seen in a Giants training camp in my years watching the team. I talked to Bob Pop about this, who has been around as long as you have, and he said maybe Jeremy Shockey is another guy that jumped out to him as a rookie that was really, really dominant in his first year. How does Neighbors rank for you in terms of rookies you see him in camp, and frankly, how quickly he's been dominant?
It's funny. I have a story coming out for our post special section about the rise of the wide receiver and how the young guys, now it's like, Malik will just do what Jamar Chase did or what Justin Jefferson did or what Odell Beckham did, and it's like, well, maybe he will, but there's no question that years ago, I remember when Amani Toomer came into the league, okay, as a second round draft pick. Now, he was not Malik Neighbors, he was not considered that type of player, but Amani told me they didn't want me to succeed as a rookie. Dan Reeves hated rookies. They did everything they could to keep rookies off the field because they didn't trust us.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So he said, it was basically, and I remember it's like, okay, the rookies, remember rookie quarterbacks? They were like, thank you for coming. Go sit in a corner and learn. And in a year or two or three, we'll get to you. You know what I mean? So it's a different world, obviously. A bunch of the starting, top quarterbacks are going to start already. So obviously Malik Neighbors is going to be good. But I just think, what is the last major thing we saw Malik Neighbors do? Drop a ball in his hands against the Jets in the joint scrimmage, right? That the offense at the time seemed to think this is going to be a big play to help us get off, leave the, Florham Park with feeling good about ourselves. He is a rookie. Okay. He is a rookie. It's not LSU anymore. It just isn't. I think he's terrific. If you told me right now, is he going to have, 70, 1,100 and 7 touchdowns, I would say, yeah. Maybe I'd bet more than that, if he stays healthy. But I just think, in my mind, I always think of what Amani said. He's a rookie. He's a rookie. Even Amani said, I said, is he going to break all your records? He said, I don't know. He's never been on the field before. Let's see what he can do. But yes, he's been incredibly impressive, and more so than the physical stuff, which I think we all saw. You can put on the tape and see he's big too. I'm sure Kim and Art, would agree. When we first saw him, you'd think of rookies as skinny. He's big. He's got big lower legs. He looks like a kid who's not a little kid running around out there. But I just think I'm very impressed with the way he comports himself. I'm very impressed. He just talks like a normal person. You know what I mean? He looks out, he talks. He doesn't light up the room with his quotes, and he doesn't look down and say nothing. He just talks like a normal young man, and I think that's really good.
Kim, and I think Paul makes a good point because the one question when, I do all the draft stuff leading up to the draft, I'm at the combine, I talk to everybody, and the question I ask, which is a question everyone asks about wide receivers, right? Like, does this guy have that wide receiver diva factor in him, right? Is he the guy that's going to make it all about him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? My sense from talking to him, I like to get your sense, he doesn't seem like that type of kid. He wasn't one of these, 5-star recruits that was the number one kid through his entire high school career. He seems like a kid that has a pretty good head on his shoulders to me.
Yeah, and after that one day scrimmage team building situation with the Jets, Malik said he dropped too many balls. I mean, he was willing to offer that up. It was apparent, but it wasn't like he was, unwilling to talk to the media afterwards or anything like that. He's, I think that they're kids to me. I know they're grown men, but these young men to me, have grown up so differently than the receivers that we, covered way back in the day, like Paul's talking about, like Art has covered. They're so wise in terms of how to act and what to say and that kind of thing. But I do find with Neighbors, just a little bit of, I belong here, but I'm not looking to push my way through the door right now. And he's going to push his way through the door because he's the best receiver they have. But I find that somewhat endearing. And I really liked how he came back after that Jets practice and took it on his shoulders that he didn't play well enough. I really liked that.
Yeah, and being able to be self-critical in public in front of the media and admit that you did something poorly and to get better, I think I agree, Kim. I think that's a really good sign. Or feel free to jump in on the wide receivers and Neighbors if you want to.
Yep.
But when we talk about this ecosystem around Daniel, and you can kind of see it in the way Brian Daboll talks about it. And frankly, I've almost been surprised because Brian Daboll doesn't like to let anything out about what he's really thinking about stuff. He seems to have a confidence level with the offensive line in front of Daniel that we probably haven't seen here in 10 years with this veteran group.
Yeah, I'll get to that. And just one point on Neighbors. I think mentioning Shockey, I've heard from some people inside the building that attitude, the kind of attitude, I know this dog mentality that everyone's talked about with Malik Neighbors, that was Jeremy Shockey from all the reports that I've heard through the years. I wasn't here covering the team, but Shockey had that edge. You didn't step to Shockey unless you expect him to swing back. I mean, that was pretty much it. And I thought it was ironic that in the 2 joint practices against the Lions, Malik, I think, caught 17 of 18 passes in the 2 days. The one he didn't was the one he got into the fight, and they're throwing punches because it's just that edge. And I think they embrace that. I think Brian Daboll loves the fact that he has a player on this offense now that is not Mr. Nice Guy, and it doesn't mean he's a bad guy. I think Brandon Brown nailed it at the combine when we watched on Hard Knocks. He said to Joe Shane flat out in that suite, he brings something to the table that we do not have. We've got a bunch of nice guys. Even, Dexter Lawrence. What do you see about Dex? You see the dancing, the smiling. Kayvon doesn't have that edge. Andrew Thomas is a nice guy. They're all a bunch of nice guys. It doesn't mean they're not going to compete. Malik's got that different feel to him as a player. So I think that would stick out for me for Neighbors. And on the offensive line, obviously, they flipped the mentality. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll got here year 1, and it was all about developing the offensive line. They put young guys out on the field. They needed to get guys, going. They drafted not only Azudu, but they drafted McKeithen, and they needed Evan Neal. They needed those 3 guys to all of a sudden, hey, this is going to be our line of the future. And what they ran into is the idea of you need a lot of things to go right in order to develop young offensive linemen and rely on them very quickly. So I think one of the reasons why Brian Daboll is so confident in what they have up front now is that there's a tangible aspect to John Runyon, Jermaine Illuminor, and Greg Van Roten. You know what you're getting with those guys on the field. Now, I've made this point, Van Roten, he might be 5 of 5. You may look at him and say in his career, he's always been the weakest link in an offensive line. He's not the Andrew Thomas, but you can raise all boats if your weakest link is a seasoned veteran like a Greg Van Roten at right guard. And I think that's kind of what the Giants have set up here now, is that they realized last year they were only as good as their weakest link. And when you're pulling Justin Pugh off the couch in October and putting him at left tackle in prime time against Buffalo, your weakest link might not be Justin Pugh, but what's behind him. And that's kind of the whole collective here. So I think that's why the confidence in the front line is where it is right now going into the season.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
And, Kim, and I think when you look at this roster, it's very young, right? I looked at it. There's only 9 players that are over 27 years old on the roster. And I find it interesting that 4 of those 9 are offensive linemen that they brought in this offseason. Jermaine Illuminor, Aaron Stinney, Greg Van Roten, and I'm missing one. Who's the 4th guy? There's one more in that. And Austin Schlottman. He's those are the 4 veterans. And I just feel like we saw what happened last year when guys got hurt. They went into the season saying, look, we're not going to get into that situation. And they kept 10 offensive linemen, which is a lot. And they have so many guys that have played games. And I just feel like they know they need to have a raised floor in terms of offensive line play. So, frankly, all of us do not have to sit through the offensive football we saw through most of last year.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line should be better, seems to be better. They're professional in talking with the media, that kind of thing. The one that still confounds me, Evan Neal. I mean, top draft pick, a top 10 draft pick, obviously by Joe Shane, and it's just not working out. And he can't get on the field. And what if he does have to get on the field? How's he going to play? Is he going to be up to the task? Because you and I both know, we all know, offensive lines, generally speaking, don't go through the entire season without an injury or a couple. We've seen that already. So, Evan Neal, to me, could end up having to play a vital role on this line. What happens then? I truly hope, only because of this narrative, I kind of hope he's up to it. I'm just not in any way, shape, or form sure of it.
Yeah, it sounds like, based on what we heard from Joe Shane and Brian Daboll last week, he's basically locked in at right tackle. They have not thought about using me at guard yet. So I would imagine that they'll kind of use Illuminor as the swing guy, right? So if, and the Giants do not want this to happen, if Andrew Thomas has to miss some time, Illuminor would move to left tackle, then Neal would probably slide in at right tackle. And then you're right, Kim, we'll have to see if he's ready and, maybe some more time on the field, that Carmen Brasillo can make that happen. So, Paul, we've talked about the O-line. We've talked about the wide receivers. What does that improvement in these 2 units mean for Daniel Jones? Because I did this the other day. I went back and I looked at the last 5 years with Daniel Jones. The Giants have had a receiver gain more than 750 yards in Daniel Jones's time here once. It was Darius Slayton. He gained 751. Darius Slayton has been the leading receiver for this team in 4 of the last 5 years. The other one was Kenny Golladay. You look at other teams around the league, you will not see a situation with that low of production at the top of the wide receiver chart. We know what the offensive line has looked like over the past 5 years. So I think this is the best situation that's been around Daniel since he's been here. What does this mean for the quarterback? And what does that mean for how high or much higher he can raise his level of play here for the Giants in 2024?
It's funny. I think whenever we ask Daniel, is this the best group of wide receivers you've had? How many times have we asked that to Eli Manning over 16 years, right? Every 2 or 3 years, Eli, is this the best group? And he would say, he would say, he wouldn't say yes, and he wouldn't say no, and he would say how good they are. And, if it was Manningham and Cruz And Knicks, the answer was yes, right? It was Plaxico and Amani and Steve Smith. The answer was yes. And the other years, it was like, nah, not really. So, I mean, this is a good group. I mean, Jalen Hyatt is still waiting to catch his first touchdown pass. You know what I mean? So, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, we talked about Neighbors. I mean, Slayton is, Slayton's numbers might go down. I mean, they probably will go down. I mean, we can always pencil him in for 50 and 720, right? But I think the Giants would like if those numbers go down because that means Hyatt's are going up with more big play potential. Neighbors is certainly going up, and even Wandale, if he stays healthy. I mean, Wandale should be one of those slot guys who runs around and catches 80 passes, right? So, for Daniel, I think it'll give him a chance. That's what it will give him. I mean, you can't have offensive linemen on the field who don't know what they're doing. And there were times right? I mean, there were times last year.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Didn't know what they were doing. So I am very confident that if Andrew Thomas and John Runyon get beat on a trick, right? They will go back to the bench and they will talk about it, and then they won't get beat on it again. Everyone gets beat. Everyone gets beat. I was just listening to I think Mark Schlereth on one of the radio shows or something, and he said we're the only position on the field, but we're the worst athletes on the field, and we have to block against the best athletes on the field every play. The old, us fat guys can't stop the athletes kind of thing. But so they're going to get beat. And so I think it gives Daniel a chance. I hope he stays healthy. That's the main thing. I think, kind of not underreported, but, it was just, Daniel Jones tore his ACL. He'll come back and he'll be ready for next year. You know how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into just me saying or writing that in one paragraph? They expect him to be back next year, right? And every day he's in there. And, I talked to him a little bit yesterday, and he's, on Wednesday in the locker room. And he's, he talked about, all the guys who helped him. And he said, I know it's their job. He said, I know it's their job of Ronnie Barnes and all the trainers to help me. I know it's their job. But he said, they really did their job and they put their heart into it. And so did Daniel. We know he's a hard worker, so he's healthy. And I mean, that's what I want to see. Is he going to be on the team next year? Are we going to be doing this roundtable, God willing, next year and talking about Daniel Jones? I don't know. I think the odds are probably against it, but let's let him be healthy with a competent offensive line. And then, whatever happens, happens.
Guys, think about this for a minute, just to jump in here. Daniel Jones not only went through that grueling rehab this offseason, after a year in which he got his contract that was supposed to validate him being here, right, off the playoffs, did not play well, had a neck injury, then had the knee injury. Then he had to essentially hear from February on about how the Giants were going to draft a quarterback. Then he had to watch quarterbacks come here, all of them come here on 30 visits and walk through the building and basically walk past his locker in the locker room. So you take all of that.
And by the way, Art, have that all televised.
And then, and I was going to say, you take all of that, and then 3 months later, have to relive it again when everyone publicly gets to see it. Again, I don't know. I agree with Paul, and I'm sure Kim feels the same way because we've had conversations. I don't know what Daniel Jones is going to be. I don't know if he's going to absorb what happened last year the way David Carr did and wreck David Carr's career, and he's just shell-shocked. And, I thought watching that preseason game in Houston, I think Daniel Jones is almost anticipating not having enough time, and I think that's kind of part of this progression too, knowing that, hey, this offensive line might actually give me a pocket. I don't have to run out of it too quickly. That mental aspect of it, I think beyond the physical, I think mentally where Daniel Jones is, we know who he is physically. We know his limitations. We know his positives, but mentally, is he ready to come in here and compete from day one at the highest level possible? Because if he's not going to reach his potential, and in turn, this team is not going to reach its potential.
Yeah. Final thing on the offense to you, Kim, before we jump over to the defense here. Maybe I've been blue-pilled a little bit. I don't know. I'm actually excited about this offense for the first time in quite a while, to be honest with you. I know Saquon's not here, but like most other NFL offenses, you think the best player on this offense is now going to be a wide receiver. I think it's easier. And Brian Daboll, frankly, would rather have his offense built around a wide receiver than he would a running back based on what we've seen in prior spots. We talked about the offensive line being better. I'm not saying this is a top 10 offense. They're going to score 27 points a game or anything like that, but I think we are going to have a significantly better offensive football than what we've seen here over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's undeniably true, or should be true, and if it's not, a whole lot of people have to answer for that. They brought in a really good offensive line coach, and the offensive line is always the sticking point for the Giants. Maybe this year it's one of the shining lights. I think that, a Giants fan who thinks that right now, I wouldn't try to dissuade him or her. I mean, they've done a good job, it seems, with getting this line together, putting in the spare parts, if you will, when they've needed to, but they seem to be healthy going into the season. That's good news. I just think with the New York Giants, with Daniel Jones, the expectations should be high. These are professional athletes. They're not still in college. They don't need to be babied. And I do think it's time for Daniel Jones to lead a team to the absolute best of his ability to go somewhere after the final regular season week of the season. And I know he did it once. I think he needs to do it again this season. And if he would, I think he'd prove a whole lot of people wrong.
I lied. I said that'll be the last thing on the offense. Real quick, Art and Paul, you guys can both take this quickly. What difference do you think Brian Daboll's play calling does make for this? How much different does this look because of Daboll in combination with the new pieces they have on offense? Art, why don't you go first?
I don't think this was a knock on Mike Kafka. I'll say that. I'll put that out. I know
I agree.
That's not the outside perception, but I think Brian Daboll realized, his greatest strength is as a play caller. I mean, the reason he has this Giants job is because of what he did as an offensive coordinator and a play caller. So you take out the middleman, Kafka's up in the booth, he's relaying stuff. Then when things go wrong, Daboll is going to be aggressive. He's going to not shy away from being aggressive. And the only people he has to answer to are up the food chain. He's not the OC that has to answer to the head coach. He answers to himself. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that we're going to see on this offense, is that no matter what, they are going to keep attacking. And it may look ugly early on, but ultimately in this league, if you don't hit explosive plays, you are not going to score. And we have seen that from the Giants the last 2 years.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think it made total sense 2 years ago when he came in and said, I'm not going to call the plays. He's a rookie head coach. He got a lot on his plate. He elevated a guy, Mike Kafka, who never called plays at any level, right? He never called plays. He worked for Andy Reid. Andy Reid calls the plays. So he gave it to him. I don't think Mike Kafka was incompetent, and I think he is smart. But it makes total sense then not to do it, and it makes 100% sense this year to say, look, I'm doing it. And I don't think it's as simple as, okay, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down. If I go down with the ship, I'm going to be, the guy at the rudder, right? Is it a rudder? Or is it I'm not a boatsman. I don't know.
Wheel, maybe?
Wheel, the controls, yeah, whatever it is.
The controls, maying, maybe?
The controls. I'm going to go down calling the plays if I have to go down. I don't think it's as dire as that, but yeah, this is what, as Art said, this is why he's the Giants head coach, is because he has offensive acumen and calls plays. I mean, he went to college for 1 year, right? Nick Saban hired him, and, he shuffled between two NFL quarterbacks, Tua and Jalen Hurts, and they won a national championship and scored 1 million points. The guy knows how to call plays. So I think it makes a huge difference. Huge, not just, oh, it's okay. I think it makes a major difference. He's one of the best in the league at it. And as Art said, he doesn't have to, if he does something and it doesn't work out, he just goes home and looks in the mirror and says, idiot, why'd you do that? So it's good. It's all on him. And I think that's a good thing.
Football season is coming, and so is the next college semester. If you need funding, a Citizen student loan could help you pay for 100% of your school certified costs. Get your rate quote in about 2 minutes at citizensbank.com/pay-for-college. Kim, defense. This front's going to be a lot of fun. You talked about Dexter Lawrence earlier. You got Brian Burns, who, boy, he was great talking to the media the other day. He just seems like such a nice guy. And then you have Kayvon Thibodeau, who I know he thinks he's going to take another step here in year number 3. But this front, I'm not going to quite harken back to the OC Strahan, Justin Tuck. We're not there yet, but this should be fun.
It should be fun, and they're athletic. Obviously, Dexter is unmatched probably in this league.
He's one of one. He's one of one.
Yeah, exactly. So, I look at the defensive front for the Giants as a lot of fun. I actually sat down with Brian Burns very early in training camp for an interview that'll be in Newsday's season preview issue. And I was really struck by a couple of things, guys. First of all, he thanked me profusely for asking him to do the interview. That kind of stuff resonates with me, maybe not with anyone else. I know that's an eye roll for some people, but it matters sometimes in that kind of getting to know a new player on the team, a big player on the team. It matters to me. So he was also not hurried with his answers. When I finished, he said, "Is that all you need?" As opposed to getting up and running out of the building or something. So Brian Burns, I think, makes a great first impression. My sense is that he will carry that through. And it would not surprise me if Dexter Lawrence thinks that Brian Burns already has been very, very good for that room, because I'm pretty sure Dexter believes that.
Yeah, and I don't want to relate this back to the offense already here, Paul, but if you can just play with the lead a little bit, and the Giants have been the worst first quarter scoring team in football the last 2 years, and this goes back to the year they made the playoffs. Remember, they had all those wins in 2022 are comeback wins. They didn't have leads in those games. They had to come back. If they could just play with the lead a little bit and let these pass rushers go to work, I think that's one of the reasons Brian Burns' sack totals have been depressed over the course of his career. Because the Panthers have stunk. They won 5 games a year. They never had leads. They couldn't score. If you could just get this defense a lead a little bit, I think it helps your defensive line, and it allows that defensive line to maybe protect the back end a little bit, which we all know might be a weakness.
Schmelk, you're teeing Paul up for the conversation that we had at Brian Burns' locker. So go ahead, Paul. I'm waiting for this one.
Yeah. What was the stat, Art? He had not taken a snap
with the lead in the fourth quarter.
Last year, because the 2 games they won were on field goals.
Is that true?
So he did not take a snap with the lead. Okay. Because I said to him, Brian, we always talk about, look, for 100 years, we've been, I've been talking to these guys, what is it like, do you want to just pin your ears back? We always say that. I don't even know what that means. Now, we know what it means, but I don't think anyone pins their ears back. You just want to pin your ears back and go after the quarterback. But I mean, if we all know what that means, I mean, Brian Burns had never been able to do that, right? He can't pin his ears back. I mean, they're losing the game in Carolina, and the team wants to run the ball. And so, yeah, this should be fun. When Kim was talking, I couldn't help but smile when she was talking about Brian Burns, and he was great to sit down with. I mean, he's a little bit playful too. He loves his Spider-Man. He's got the Spider-Man, and he kind of, and so, Art and I don't think Kim will relate to this quite as much, but Art and I, as comic book Spider-Man, aficionados, somebody asked him at his locker on Wednesday, so how's Spider-Man doing in New York? In the city, and he just goes, without missing a beat, he goes, "I've been swinging around." I mean, it's like you had me at hello. I mean, it's a great, you had, I could just see him up there, some night after a game, and he's up there swinging around up in Manhattan, and he also told a great story about screwing up at the Lincoln Tunnel and going through the Lincoln Tunnel, and then something happened, and he made the wrong turn and got back and went back through the Lincoln Tunnel, and so he's going up back at Lincoln Tunnel, and me stupidly says, with the tolls, that's expensive. And I'm thinking, which is what we would think, right? Geez, I got to pay an extra $15 in the toll here. And I'm thinking, what was his contract? 141 or something? So, the easy pass is probably not the first thing on his mind, but he did say he let out a few choice words when he's going back through the tunnel where he doesn't want to go through. So let's hope his pathway to the quarterback when he pins his ears back is a little more direct than, going back and forth through the Lincoln Tunnel.
Sounds like a lead to a feature story that's going to appear in the New York Post, if it has not already by the time this show airs.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Yeah, keep your eyes open, Art. Keep your eyes open. That could be coming to a website near you. Yes.
So I think real quickly, the question is, can this front cover up where maybe you have a lot of youth and not quite the amount of resources put into the position that you have up front here?
I don't know necessarily if it's going to cover up. I mean, you look at all the statistics and the performance that we want to talk about, Shane Bowen's defense in Tennessee, you pretty much see that, they've had issues on the back end. It's not that they've ignored it, but they haven't put their resources into the back end. So, you would imagine that early on in the season, you're going to see some weaknesses that show themselves. A big thing that I think everyone in this building, and I know Brian Daboll, was criticized for his little what they captured in Hard Knocks in Joe Shane's office when he just looked at his phone and spit out the defensive rankings of Shane Bowen when he told Joe Shane that that he was going to hire him. And it was he's, red zone defense is ranked, whatever. And, against the run, they're ranked this. They could not stop the run for anything under Wink Martindale. And I think that will be a big focus for this defense. And that will set up the front. Because if they can't stop the run the way they haven't been able to stop the run the last 2 years, I think they're not going to get into those pass situations. And I think all the previous defensive coordinator here wanted was to get to 2nd and long, 3rd and long, and then unleash the hounds. And I think this defense wants to play a little bit, people want to say conservative. I think it's more strategic. I think they want to win first down and then set themselves up for success with one-on-ones in certain situations. And I think, they're going to be a work in progress. There's going to be times where if it's Cordell Flott or Nick McLeod or someone else who ends up on this team playing opposite Tay Banks, or even Tay Banks, he's only in his 2nd year. He had a solid year, but there were games where he was attacked and, he gained valuable lessons. I mean, I remember the touchdown to DK Metcalf where he just lulled Tay to sleep in the end zone and caught the touchdown. I mean, they are very, very young. But I do think that Okereke in the middle, we know what he did last year. I think he's a stud. And I think he's probably vastly overrated league wide for what he brings to this defense. I think the safeties could be pretty good here. I really do. And I think Tyler Nubin is one of those players that the more we see him on the field, the more he's going to morph into a leader on this team a lot faster than what people think. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, John, I think the secondary will have its issues, but if they can win up front, they're going to have a lot more positive plays than negative plays if they can put this whole thing together.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think they kind of have put their resources into the secondary arc, but it's been draft pick resources, right? And you mentioned it's a young unit.
Yes.
Your starting cornerback is a 1st-round pick. Your other starting cornerback's a 3rd-round pick. Your starting nickel's a 3rd-round pick. Your starting safety's a 2nd-round pick. And then, Pinnock was a waiver claim. Dane Belton's a 4th-rounder. That's fine.
Sure.
It's just Kim, a lot of youth. And it's funny, when everyone talks about the secondary where there could be some issues, I think the assumption is, well, at least you have Deontay Banks sitting over there and you know he's going to be great. Well, to Art's point, it's his 2nd year. He's a 1st-round pick. He's a lot of talent. But, boy, there's a lot of pressure on him, to not eliminate the other team's best wide receiver, but certainly to not let the other team's best wide receiver ruin the game for you. And for a guy in his 2nd year that's frankly going into a 2nd defensive system in as many years, doesn't ask him to play a lot differently than what Wink asked him to play last year. I think there's a lot of pressure on Tay Banks here to become very good very quickly.
Yeah, and I think that rookies find that. I mean, Joey Porter Jr. in Pittsburgh started from day 1 too, and people didn't like his game, and he's been pretty good, from afar. I mean, I don't watch the Steelers every week, but, he's been pretty good. I haven't seen anything about their training camp, so I may be talking out of school. But, I think rookies at that position can come in if they have the agility, if they have the arm length, everything they measure at the combine, they can do it.
John,
Paul,
what I wonder just about, we talked about, you want to blend at every position, right? At every position group, you want to blend. And, I know, like Art said, they talked about Tyler Nubin like he's going to run for president. You know what I mean? They think he's got this incredible leadership quality to him. So we'll see. He was out a lot in the summer, and it's hard to just, he's going to be a leader, but I think they think he will evolve into that. But what I wonder when you mentioned about, and both Kim and Art who talked about Deontay Banks, who does he lean on? Let's say he's going against Justin Jefferson, right, in the opener, and catch. He's getting frustrated. who does he look at? Who was the veteran? Who was the Xavier McKinney? Who's the Adoree Jackson? Who can just sit him down and say, look, okay, this is what I'm seeing. Calm down. I mean, it's not going to be Cordell Flott. It's not going to be Nick McLeod. It's not going to be Newbin. I mean, Jason Pinnock, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's no who's and I'm not saying you just look. They signed Jalen Mills, right? And we all thought, the Green Goblin, another comic book reference, right? He's going to come in and be like the third safety and be a veteran back there. And he got hurt and he didn't make the team. So as Kim is right, they could have signed a cornerback or a safety with 5 or 6 years in the league who maybe has lost a little something, but he's a veteran. Okay, we kind of know what he can do when you plug him in. And they chose not to go that way, really. Trey Herndon was here all summer, right? And so I get it. They're going to have a lot of young guys there. And I just wonder, you mentioned Deonte Banks, right? I mean, it's a lot on him. He's a first round pick, and that's the responsibility and that comes with it being a first round pick. But yeah, they did not surround him with well, who knows? Maybe he won't get any action. Maybe just be throwing a Flott and McLeod all day, and he doesn't have to worry about covering anybody.
All right, final question for you, Art, before we kind of get our overall season predictions or outlooks, however you want to look at it. I ran the numbers yesterday. Of the Giants, 53 guys in their initial roster, which I'm sure will be different by the time this airs on Monday. 25 players that are 24 years old or younger. 32 of their 53 players have 4 years of experience or fewer. This is a young team, and the success of this team largely, to me, is going to depend upon the players the Giants have drafted over the past 4 years taking that next step. I think they feel like they have players in the building that have ability and have skill, whether it's because of injury or other reasons they have not met that potential yet. A lot of times it takes some young guys time. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think largely, we talked about the Brian Burns and the Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas. You have to get what you're going to get out of your star players. But if this team really does want to be better and for the floor to get, risen and the tide's lifting all boats, these young guys have to become the players that I think the Giants thought this year when they drafted them.
Yeah, very, very fair. We talked Tay Banks, that comes to Kayvon Thibodeau too,
and the receivers.
Yeah. And the receivers, I think that's what, I've talked to some Giants fans about the receivers, and I think we all have dealt with Jalen Hyatt and believe in his talent and what kind of player he can be. But if you're comparing Darius Slayton to Jalen Hyatt, to me, there's no question right now the better receiver, the more seasoned receiver is Darius Slayton. Now, do the Giants get caught in the middle of, we want to play Hyatt, so Slayton's kind of getting scraps? And I don't mean that negatively. I just mean, he's the fourth guy in. Or do they look at it and say, you know what, we got to keep Slayton on the field and let Jalen be the home run threat because we still have more faith in Slayton, getting open in the different route combinations. So, but to your point, I mean, we're talking Cordell Flott. He's a third year, third round pick. Those guys get on the field and show whether or not they can sink or swim. I think out of all the younger players on this roster that they're relying on, the one guy that probably doesn't get talked about enough is John Michael Schmitz.
No, Art, I think, and I don't think we had mentioned his name yet on this podcast, so I'm happy you did. All right, final thoughts here, guys. Kim, let's start with you. Just give me what you think this season is going to look like, and maybe the one factor that you think can turn this season that's going to determine whether or not it's going to be successful or it might end up being disappointing.
Well, I mean, I for Newsday, I picked them at 7 wins. So I don't have, dramatically high expectations for this team. But in the preseason, they've earned that, in my opinion, because of the shortness of the quarterback situation. You also wonder about just everything beyond the front led by Dexter. So, I look at this team and I just see too many holes that, to my eye shouldn't still be there. I know it's easy for me to say as I sit here in my kitchen, evaluating, but, they've left themselves short, particularly at corner where you absolutely can't, in my opinion.
Paul, so Kim goes with corner as the thing that might sway the season here, Paul. How about you? Where are you in terms of what this season is going to look like, and what factor or position group or what, however you want to take it, will kind of determine whether or not this is a successful season or a disappointing one?
If I could look in the future and think of one stat now that will be at the end of the year, which stat would it be that will help me determine if the Giants are any good? Now, you can say, Malik Neighbors, 120 catches, or, Kayvon Thibodeau, 15 sacks. To me, the one number is Daniel Jones starts. Daniel Jones starts. If you tell me it's 15 or more, I would say they can win 8, 9, 10 games, because number one, he's healthy. Number two, he didn't play so badly that they say, you know what, we got to just make a move here or whatever. I mean, I don't think anyone in the building is salivating and saying, we got Drew Lock, we can always put him in. I don't think they're thinking that. I really don't. I think they want Daniel Jones to be the starter. So if he starts almost every game, I think that means he's healthy, and that means that he's functioning enough. So give me his starts, and I'll tell you, if it's 8 or 9, not good enough. They're going to be in big trouble. If it's 14, 15 or more, I think they could be okay.
All right, so we got cornerback and quarterback. I think those are two very good spots to look at. Art, how about you?
I'm going to go back to the word that I used earlier, and it's not necessarily a position group. It's the explosive plays. I think if you look at the end of the season and you say this team had much more explosive plays on offense than they gave up on defense, I think they're probably going to be sitting right around 8, 9 wins and really pushing to try to surprise people and get into the playoffs again. I think if it's tilted in the other direction, that they're giving up way too many big plays on the outside, defensively, and we've seen a little bit of that, and that's one of the reasons why there was so much concern at times in the practice with the Jets, that they were just seemed like there were plays being made downfield that the secondary, it wasn't just one-on-one big plays. It was just kind of guys running open, that kind of thing. If they can create the explosive plays on offense, to me, that means the offensive line is doing its job. It means Daniel Jones is feeling confident enough to take shots downfield. And it means that Malik Neighbors and the rest of the receivers are doing their job in completing the plays and getting down. So I that's what I say. I say it comes down to the explosive plays, because you cannot win in this league without explosive plays. And I think that's why Daboll's calling the plays. I think that's why they have Malik Neighbors here. That's why they did what they did on the offensive line, because they know they need to throw the football and cash in to score points, which they have not done each of the past 2 seasons. It's been a major grind. And if they think they're going to give up 3 to 4 touchdowns a game, they better be scoring 4 touchdowns a game, because if they're not, the record is not going to be anywhere near what they hope it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm going to go with sack differential. Maybe I'm cheating because I get to take both sides of the ball here. But as amazing as this will sound, I think people have downplayed exactly how bad the Giants' pass protection was last year. And they gave up the second most sacks in the history of the NFL. 85. That's 5 sacks a game. That is insanity. Only the Eagles in the mid-'80s, when Randall Cunningham was a rookie, he was running around not knowing what the heck he was doing, has a team given up more sacks than the Giants. They need to close that gap. I don't have on the tip of my tongue how many team sacks the Giants had on defense last year. I'm not sure if any of you guys do, but that gap needs to close to get to close to even. Can you have as many sacks with your defensive front as you give up sacks on offense? To Paul's point, that shows you a couple things in terms of sacks allowed. It shows you that Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll are vibing, right? And he's getting the ball out quickly, and the offense is working because he's not taking the sacks. So the offensive line is playing better. And then if the defense is getting more sacks, all this investment in the front is working. You're probably playing with more leads, and you're having an opportunity to get more sacks. So I think those 4 points that I think all of us made, you put them together, and I think those really will determine what the Giants will do. All right, each one of you real quick. Cam, let's start with you. Where can everybody find your fantastic work?
At newsday.com.
Holy Schwartz.
Well, you can go to your local newsstand, and the New York Post will probably be sitting there. But if you don't know what a local newsstand is, then nypost.com, Twitter, I have some kind of handle with an underscore in it, which is just obscene, but they made the thing, and nobody knows what an underscore is, but I have one in my Twitter handle. So, and also a very, very attractive, very personal picture of the best pizza pie I've ever eaten. So that is also my Twitter handle. So you will be hungry for more, I guarantee you.
Art, how about you?
All right, it's northjersey.com, northjersey.com, not the other competitor that we always fight up against. But you mentioned the podcast earlier, All In with Art Stapleton. It's we're doing everything video now, so it's on YouTube, all your podcast platforms, and social media, in which I still spend way too much time on. It's Art_Stapleton. See, I got that underscore too, Paul, but unlike you, I spend way too much time on social media, so I kind of know it by heart now.
Well, guys and gals, enjoy some time off social media this weekend. Hopefully there's no breaking news that any of us have to deal with. We can actually have our only weekend off for the next 4.5 months. Good times. Thank you to Kim. Thank you to Art. Thank you to Paul. And appreciate your time as always doing this, everybody, this time of year. I know the fans enjoy it. I do as well. Everybody enjoy your weekend. We got Giants and Vikings less than a week away when this airs on Labor Day. Can't wait. We'll see you then, everybody, on the Giants Huddle podcast, presented by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants.